Hello and welcome to Craftwork, a podcast by writers for writers.
Craftwork is recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Wolastoqiyik, the people of the Wolastoq River. I'm Miriam Riche.
And I'm Mike Thorne. We'll be your co-hosts. The music for this podcast is composed and recorded by Randy Nickel-Schroeder. Phoebe Marmura is a writer and artist. Her work explores desire, femininity, domestic adventure, and reclusion. Marmura's writing can be found in Expat Press, DFL Lit, and Orca Literary Journal.
So, Phoebe, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
When did you first start writing? Is it something you've always been interested in doing?
I guess I started writing when I was a kid, but never in like a serious way. I wasn't setting out to write a novel or anything, but I would write short stories in school and just like for fun, which I never really thought about now reflecting upon it until I've like gone back and seen like in old boxes and found weird stories and things. And also often maps of like different lands, which is interesting because I'm really not into fantasy, but it kind of seemed like that could have been a direction I went.
I also used to make maps.
You've had maps like working your way into your projects now, kind of, right?
Yes, I do have maps, quite different. It's only because though I like to make maps as a child, I am really not spatial. You could see that in my child maps for sure. There are not very linear. I do make maps. My current project I'm working on takes place on an island, and there's kind of a panopticon element to it. So people are like watching, surveilling each other. And so I kind of had to make a map to see how that would manifest. I'm trying to be like Hitchcock or something, probably Delusions.
No, that's
grandeur.
Really cool. No, that's awesome. Well, I've moved away from the maps and now I feel like, I don't really do sketches, but when I'm writing now, I think a lot about interior spaces and exterior spaces, which I also used to always draw rooms and like floor plans of homes when I was a kid too. And I think that has carried on where I know where everything is in a character's house or like how it's decorated and set up, and it becomes very real.
That is something I love about your writing and about your domestic spaces, your paintings of domestic spaces. I absolutely love. They're so intricate, and the symbolism, there's almost like a mythological, folkloric element to all that you choose to include in those spaces. Your short stories have incredibly vivid and multi-sensory settings, and I know you've studied set design. I know that you interviewed, was it Linda Del Rosario, who worked on...
Yeah, on Exotica.
Yes, Exotica. Such a beautiful, just an all-around great movie, but the sets are spectacular in the literal sense. What are some of the things that you've learned through these experiences and interactions in regards to set design?
I didn't end up finishing the program. I kind of, during COVID, was taking some classes through what was then Ryerson, and now I can't remember what it's called.
I think it's a Metropolitan.
Anyway, so I was doing some set design courses, and yeah, it was really interesting. It's like the history of design and all of these things. And I loved interviewing Linda Del Rosario. I don't know a lot about filmmaking. At a point, I was like, oh, this would be so cool to be doing art stuff for films. And then I learned to be in the art department. You don't have as much creative control as you would perhaps as the director. As I'm writing, everything is very visual. And I've thought a lot about how I would love to turn a short story into a film or into a short film. I think it could translate well. As I'm writing, it's all this whole set in my mind. I don't know if I could ever make a film. I don't have any experience doing that, but definitely talking to Linda and taking those courses was cool and like an inspiration. Made me realize I don't think I want to do art direction for other people's work, but I would love to do art direction for my own stuff, if ever a possibility.
I relate to you. I like that writing, you kind of, until you bring in an editor or think about framing things for publication, you do have full control over your grand vision.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's the most insular and kind of sometimes lonely art form, but you get all the creative control and you can kind of do whatever you want. And that's what I love about it. It's just like a fun exploration.
Something else you just touched on, I guess both of you, is Phoebe. I feel like your fiction has a very strong sense of mood and of place. You're kind of describing how important that is to you as a writer. I was wondering, how do you get in the mood for writing, so to speak? Do you feel like you have to know your environments in some way before writing about them? Do you have to experience them, or is that something that can be fully imagined for you?
I think a bit of both. Like, I think it can be fully imagined, but then sometimes too, I'll try to take inspiration from places that I have been or from collecting images online. Miriam, I know that you do that as well with Arena and like Pinterest or whatever, just like saving images. And sometimes that is looking on Google Maps and seeing a cool house or real estate ads, and you kind of get to see these like intimate interior spaces before they're transformed into something else. Also, a lot of it is just made up. I like the idea of having writing be a little bit like ritualized in the sense of being in a space that I think is aesthetically pleasing and comfortable, maybe having a drink or whatever, having nice lighting. And that happens sometimes, but I also think that that can be a trap too, where it's like, oh, I need everything to be just so before I can fully focus and like delve into that world. I think sometimes doing that, the activity can become too like precious or something. So I'm trying to be more open to where I can write and like the headspace that I need to be in to tap into that world. But yeah, music too, also, I feel like is a good passage into connecting to a specific world and can very much like send you to a place that often is quite visual.
I'm curious if there's a specific type of music you like listening to while writing. That's something we haven't talked to people about before. Do you have like go-to records or artists that you like listening to while writing?
I listened to this playlist or this channel on YouTube called Nemo's Dreamscape, which is like, sounds like the radio and it's kind of static and weird, but there's like a sing song in the background and it has specific sounds. So it'll be like on the front porch in 1942 and it's raining outside and you hear like old timey like radio and then the rain. And there's very specific ones too, where it's like, you know, old Wild West, whatever. Often my stuff is set in a kind of Western or like, I don't know, Southern America feeling. And then sometimes I guess I get inspiration like pre-writing from listening to music. I don't know, I've been driving, I just got the car on the road, so I've been listening to a lot of Waylon Jennings because I have a cassette tape. I think it just depends. I go through like heavy phases. I listen to a lot of Steely Dan. They have lyrics that I just think it's like really fun and crazy writing and often very absurd. I get inspiration from that as well because I think a lot of like song lyrics, there's just much more play to them. A lot of it just doesn't seem to make sense. It's just like playing with words and playing with the feeling you get from a combination of words.
I love the shout out to Steely Dan.
I know, I'm a little embarrassed, but whatever.
And
I do love Steely
no,
Dan. Not
I
gonna lie.
perked up. There's a song by Steely Dan that I love on a narrative level, Peg on Asia, because it's like it's a persona poem kind of. It's like melancholy and kind of tawdry, so that's really cool.
And Steely Dan, I feel like a lot of the songs are kind of trippy and melancholy, but then also there's a sort of light plainness. It's really consumable, but then at the same time, it's like kind of just trippy and really fun and melancholy.
It's like kind of
Yeah.
pop on the surface, but there's a lurking, unsettling melancholy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
the darkness of yacht rock. You mentioned Westerns. That was something I wanted to bring up. I know that Western is a written genre. I know when I go to my local Value Village that there's a whole Western section. I know it ties in with romance as well.
Right.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious, is there like a certain thing, like a je ne sais quoi about Westerns that draws you towards that genre or aesthetic?
There is a je ne sais quoi. I don't really fully know how to pinpoint it, but I think it is the romanticism of it. Even the combo of like a Western romance, it's kind of removed from real society in a way. There's the elements of like danger as well as beauty in terms of the setting, and then the music, which I enjoy, and also just like playing into these kind of extreme stereotypes of men and women, and the big like brawny cowboy and the cowgirl that's supposed to be more like feminine and seductive, whatever. I just think it's like fun and extreme in a way that is interesting to me.
What are some of the books that first got you excited about reading? Like, could be even in childhood or adolescence. Were they Westerns or were they something else? I'm curious about that.
I don't even know if I've read any Westerns. I mean, I've seen Westerns, I've listened to Western music, but in terms of books that got me excited about writing, I know I've mentioned her to you before, and I'm in my room right now, and I'm looking at one of her books, Lucia Berlin, who died, and then her work came out, which is too bad. But she got kind of big, and she writes like vignettes and short stories that are fiction, but also based on her life. And she had a lot of adventures in Mexico and in the West and in the States, and had sort of a tragic life. The way she writes is beautiful, and there's just a lot of empathy in her, and the way that she encounters people in her writing is just like very beautiful. So she's great, love her. But I'm trying to think of when I was younger what I kind of got into. When I was like in high school, it was the classic like on the road beat shit that I really like. I mean, I still find value in a lot of that, but of course, like all the misogyny, and it feels to me now a little bit trite and boring, but I think that got me excited about the idea that writing wasn't this like, didn't have to be a super specific thing, and it could be kind of trippy and stream of consciousness. And I'm reading a couple different books right now, which I'm excited about. I feel like I haven't read anything in a while that I've been super excited about.
What are you reading right now?
When I was in Toronto, I went to this used bookstore and I picked up some books, and one of them is called Erotic Interludes, Tales Told by Women writers from the 80s. Some of the stories are good, some of them are not as good, but there's this thread between them all. Well, it's romantic, obviously, but it's really flowery and kind of earnest, and it's just fun. There's just something like really charming about the way that these women are talking about their desires or are telling these stories. And the cover is also great. And then, I don't know, I've been reading The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers for a long time. And I haven't finished it, but it's really good. I've been slowly reading it.
I do feel like this is a common experience with encountering the beats at a certain age. I know that was the case for me as well. Or it could be something else. I think for me, Hubert Selby Jr. was a big breakthrough as well. You brought up this moment where you realize, oh, fiction can be lots of things, or, you don't have to write following certain rules or things like that. Was that one of the big takeaways for you with reading the beats at a certain age, was kind of realizing that you could break down certain boundaries?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I was realizing that I could break down certain boundaries, that it didn't have to be one thing. And that also, I think it was just, I really latched on to that excitement of like traveling the road and having adventures, and was really like, really fully kind of attached to that romanticism. And then like slowly realized that like you can't fully have that same experience as a woman, first of all. And then also, once I was able to do a little bit of traveling, I realized that it's not as beautiful and romantic as it's often portrayed. But even as I say that, I'm thinking about those books, and it's like it was romantic and beautiful, but then there's also a lot of horrible things that happen, and drugs and addiction and sadness. There was a certain way that they framed their experiences that made it seem perhaps more magical than it was.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I remember being drawn to William S. Burroughs, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess the big one was Naked Lunch, but his fiction almost
Yeah.
reads like horror.
I know that there are women writers from that generation who I explored a little bit, but they were often the girlfriends and the wives of these people who did also write and later would write kind of encounters of what it was like to be with some of these men.
How often do you write? I mean, there's no correct approach or answer to this. I know some writers say they write when they're in the mood, others say they have to sit down for a certain amount of hours every day. And then, there's a whole range in between. Do you have a specific set practice? Does it vary depending on where you're at any given moment?
Yeah, I think it varies based on where I am and what I'm doing and how busy I am. But generally, I try to do it in the mornings with like a set amount of time. Like I'll set a timer, or I'll do like the Pomodoro thing where it's like, okay, sit and write for 30 minutes, take a little break, come back, keep doing that for a few hours. Mornings is my best and my favorite time to write, usually quite early. Sometimes I'll try to do it later in the day or throughout the day, but it sort of varies. Right now, it's the mornings when I'm not working is my like time to write. But I mean, it never feels like I'm doing it enough. And I think as I continue to write, hopefully I'll get over that, / perhaps the rituals of writing will become different. I think it's just also okay for there to be points when it's happening more and points when it's happening less, and trust that if you stop for a while or if something happens that you will come back to it. I try to remind myself that.
I relate to your notion of rituals. I do find that I have a lot of superstition surrounding my writing practice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty ubiquitous. I can speak for myself. I'm self-critical if I don't feel that I'm writing enough, whatever that might mean. But I also have found, because I just have the privilege to have a lot more writing time than usual right now. And it's so good for my brain. Like it does really, I think we've discussed this before, but this idea of like bloodletting, just getting something out. For me, it replaces the kind of ruminations I have about, life anxieties with questions I have about plot or character, or like just like kind of fun ruminations about what's going on. And I'm just wondering, like, what you were saying regarding just having faith that you'll still feel that spark if you step away from it for a while. Do you find that it has any impact on your mood, whether or not you're writing a lot? Is it kind of similarly therapeutic or enjoyable for you, or do you just not notice a distinction?
No, I definitely am with you on that. Like it feels cathartic, and if I go through a period where I'm not doing it or I'm not doing it as much, I think without realizing my mood definitely goes down, and it feels like there's stuff that is pent up, and like you said, the rumination and the day-to-day bullshit, I think, can come out in a creative way. And also when you kind of get into it, you start thinking about, like you were saying, you can think about your characters more and the plot. And I once read, like, I don't know who said it, but your fictional characters should be more important than real life, essentially. Like, take them seriously, as serious as you would take the rest of your life. When I'm writing the amount that I would like to be, I can feel it in the rest of my life. I feel much better. It can be stabilizing for sure.
Something that really stands out about your writing is the psychological realness of your characters. And we talked about your sense of place earlier too. Which part of the process do you enjoy the most? Is it designing characters? Is it writing evocative settings, or editing, or description, ideation?
Yeah, I think sort of all of it. I feel like as the character development, the plot, all of these things are kind of happening at once, and often and I don't know, maybe this is like an amateur thing, but I feel like I don't often know exactly what's going to happen before I'm writing or even while I'm writing. And that's, I think, what I enjoy. And when it works, it's really exciting. And maybe you create a character that you're really excited about. You don't really know what's going to happen with them yet, but you're sort of discovering with them, if things are going well, that is. I also really like editing, or like the early stages of editing anyways, because I feel like a lot of new material for me happens during that, like adding things in, going back and like building on a scene or whatever is really fun, because it's almost just the same process over again. Like it's still that like sense of newness. I think plot development for me is the hardest, and I'm working on something right now that I would like to be a longer piece, like maybe a novella. I know some things that are happening, but I don't know fully what will happen, and that can be a challenge.
I feel like, in a sense, it really does seem intuitive to write as you go without planning, because that's how we read, right? Like
Yeah.
we read discovering the plot as it goes along. So it seems like cognitively intuitive, but I guess there are pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Have you ever dabbled in or tried outlining, and what was that experience like for you? I remember in the past I had done it and then just thought, this is not fun. I want to dive straight into the writing. Whereas with my most recent novel, I did outline the whole thing in advance, and it turned out I really enjoyed writing an outlined novel.
I would try it. But I haven't really tried it, to be honest. Like I'm thinking about it more currently with the project that I'm doing now. Like I'm not doing a specific outline, but I keep, writing notes like, okay, maybe this happens to this character and then this will happen and then this will happen. Like I have a couple ideas for an ending, but then it's like, okay, but how am I going to get these characters to that ending and make it interesting in the middle? And I think that's fun, because like having ideas that you get excited about is fun, but then at the same time, I feel like the more that I plan it in my head, the more fear I have in terms of like getting there. It's like, okay, well, now I've decided that this is a novella that's long-ish, because I usually write short pieces, and then I've decided that this is going to happen to these characters, which I'm into, but it's like how and what if. I don't know. It's like once you have a big idea, it's like there's more room for disappointment. And that's probably just my own fears and anxieties working their way in. But when you're just writing something, like you said, the way you would read and sort of just seeing what happens and discovering it with the reader, then there's like less room for disappointment, I guess, because you don't really know what's happening yet. And you don't know what the end piece will look like. I'm curious to hear about your experience with planning it all out in that way. Like, was it difficult for you to do after not having done it that way in the past?
Yeah, in a way it was. I feel like the only reason I did it is because I felt obligated to, in order to complete the novel in the time
Hmm.
span of my my PhD funding. So I thought
Right.
I need to, whereas
Has to
and
happen.
exactly. But it's interesting. I assumed it would be a lot less fun and that it would kind of stifle my creativity. But I found, I liked what you said earlier, how sometimes part of the editing process, you're adding stuff in. And I
Hmm.
found, that also happened with an outlined novel. I would make these discoveries that would kind of change the outline, and that was okay too. But having the blueprint kind of motivated me. It allowed me to, because I found when I wrote my previous two novels without outlines, I would hit a lot of walls, and that would stop me, and I would get really frustrated and discouraged, which is
Hmm.
also fine. Then you're problem solving. It's all part of the process. But I don't know. I don't think I will ever write a novel without an outline again now that I've done it. Granted,
Yeah.
I know writers who swear by, pantsing, as they say, and don't want to write with. So it all depends. It's all personal, but that was my experience.
No, I definitely like the idea of having a plan, because I think that in in other parts of my life, I like to work that way. Even though I was just saying it makes me feel scared, because then it's like, what if it doesn't work, or what if I can't get the writing to be what I want it to be? I could see how it could take a lot of the fear out of the process because you are pre-planning it and like, okay, like I know what the scene is going to be. I just have to put the words to it. And so I'd definitely be open to exploring that maybe with this project because I don't know what's going on. So
I like that you talked about fear because I feel like fear is always, in some way, it's always part of the process. It can be a motivator, it can be discouraging. Is that something you struggle with as a writer? Is working through fear? I mean, for me, my fear kind of informs my writing in a way. I kind of like to write through fear or write about fear. I'm curious
yeah,
to hear, I don't know, how does fear play a role in your work as a writer?
I definitely feel a lot of fear, but it's like the space between writing. That's where all the fear is. And it's like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write now. And then there's that rush or, I find I'm putting it off. It's like, why am I doing all of these other things that are much less important to me instead of writing if I have the time for it? So there's a lot of fear, but then there's like, I think there's still a bit of fear as I'm writing, but hopefully if you can get into the space where you're like in a rhythm, then the fear is gone and it's just fun and exciting. But yeah, sometimes the fear remains through the writing process, but I think it's mostly when I'm not writing and when I'm planning to be writing. Yeah, and then I also think a lot of my characters, there's fear within them as well, and there's a lot of exploration and searching and yearning and looking for something, and I think trying to be fearless in a very scary world.
That resonates with me, what you're both saying. Fear plays a role in my writing as well. I am interested in literary thrillers, and Gillian Flynn talked about how you really just have to write about what scares you the most if you're trying to do that, even if it's kind of offensive or frightening. Like when you're first writing it, you're the only person who has to see it, who has to interact with it, and just get it down first. It sounds like maybe, Phoebe, you're talking a little bit apprehension. Like, do you have kind of like that feeling that you're about to jump off a cliff? Is that how you feel when you kind of,
Definitely.
yeah,
That anxiety, that like buzzing of the fear that you're gonna write and it's not gonna work, or it's not gonna, I don't know, of disappointing yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that too. And you recommended Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott to me. Thank you.
Yes.
It was great. Something that helped me a lot, as she said, like, you don't have time to worry. I mean, I'm not saying that anyone else, either of you, worry about this, but, sometimes I have these worries that I'm not good at writing. She says, like, you don't have time to worry about that. It gets in the way of writing. So I often tell myself that when I sit down to write,
I like that. Yeah, it does get in the way.
Yeah, totally. And it's useless anxiety.
What you were saying about Gillian Flynn saying to write about your fear, what scares you most. That's cool because now, like reflecting on specific stories, I've definitely done that unintentionally, written about what scares me the most. Perhaps the subconscious was trying to explore some things. I like that writer advice.
I mean, fear and desire, to me at least, go hand in hand to some level. And I've noticed that the characters in your fiction often seem conflicted about their own desires. Writers often talk about what characters want versus what they need. That's kind of like a rule of thumb to get us through some of the beats that we're talking about or talking around. And there are so many different ways to approach that idea. How do you think about this topic in your own work?
I think there's so much overlap in getting what you want and getting what you need, and following the desires, following the dreams. Often my characters are looking for something and they sort of go on that quest by following their desires, by following their dreams. But that's not necessarily like, I don't know, it's not necessarily like hedonistic desires or like, I want this now. I think it's more of following like an imaginative thread of like maybe looking for something that doesn't even really exist, but trying to just create it in their own lives and like going against the grain in a way. And sometimes not really finding it or struggling to find it, or maybe they do find it and it's not really what they wanted, or it doesn't bring the the piece that they wanted. But in terms of these characters, it's often like them following their wants or their desires or their imagination is them kind of also looking for what they need.
I think you're talking about some of the interesting dynamics at play with your characters in your fiction. Do you see any recurring fixations, like themes or emotions, that you find yourself coming back to time and again in your writing?
Usually, like, the protagonist is a woman, and I think often she's interacting with men in a way that, like, not sort of wanting to be them, but also just like wanting to connect with them or be friends with them. And then a sort of like pushback of, like, there's often an aspect, I think, of fear within those like friendships or within those encounters. Yeah, exploring that a little bit is definitely a theme that I'd say comes up a lot. And like this, again, fear mixed with desire and perhaps like an envy that sometimes the women have, or these men are just like wanting the freedom that they have and trying to get it. And yeah, just like a sense of loss, but a determination, I would say, in this quest, or I keep saying the word quest, but just looking for the thing, whatever it may be.
Earlier, you were talking about your interest in Westerns and romances, the nexus of those, and how almost performative or extreme or polarized gender roles can be. So, not a question so much as an observation that I think it's really cool that you are kind of working within or drawing upon a genre that really feeds into those fixations that you have. I like it. That's all.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, it's fun.
Have you had any mentors or champions of your work, people who've encouraged you along the way?
Yeah, I've had some encouragers, I suppose. For a while, I was writing and not really showing it to anyone or like thinking much about it, but I did that writing retreat in St. Andrews, the Go and Write, with Gerard Collins, who writes Gothic fiction. And he really liked my writing. And he was probably the first person who was a writer, who was like an adult. I mean, I am an adult. I was an adult at the time, but I mean, just like he was being a writer and doing that. And he really encouraged me to just take it more seriously and start sending things out and start submitting things. And that was something that like I hadn't even really thought about. Like I didn't even really know how to format a short story. I was just writing stuff and really enjoying it, but I don't think I had any intention of trying to publish anything. Didn't really understand the process of that or literary journals or any of these things. So he was an early champion and that was helpful. Other than that, like different writers in residencies that I've done, but I think in my day-to-day life, like my dad is quite supportive. My mom's pretty supportive. Yeah, I've always been envious, and I think you can achieve this if you're in a program, like a school program, a PhD program or a master's program of creative writing, because you have those mentors and you have the profs and stuff and someone who's like looking at your work a bit more regularly. And I think that would be really nice. And I think a lot of people have writing communities. That's not really something that I have here. I mean, I have like writer friends and you guys, but I don't have like a mentor that I kind of converse with or share stuff with regularly. But it would be nice, maybe someday.
Well, speaking of mentors, I'm curious if you can think of a specific piece of writing advice that someone has given you that has stuck with you. It could be for better or for worse.
A few years ago, I was reading a lot about the process of writing and like how much are like real writers writing and what's their word count and what do I need to be doing to achieve something specific. And a lot of the writing advice that I have enjoyed was sort of more about the balance between writing and real life. Also, obviously, love Annie Lamott's Bird by Bird, and I think that that's just like good life advice. And even just the phrase like bird by bird, like one thing at a time. And okay, this is actually Henry Miller on writing. he says, work according to program and not according to mood, and stop at the appointed time, and cement a little every day rather than add new fertilizers. Keep human, see people, go places, drink if you feel like it. Discard the program when you feel like it, but go back the next day. Concentrate, narrow down, exclude. There's like a lot of them, but I think it's like prioritize that, work within a program. It's also just like don't let the fear come in. Still similar to the bird by bird, just one little bit at a time, keep doing it, and then leave it and walk away from it and have fun and do your regular life, but always come back.
That Henry Miller quote is fascinating because his fiction is so intensely embedded in, I guess, intense experience in drinking and sex, and his fiction is very embodied, it's very inhabited, and it's difficult to imagine him writing that fiction without also moving through the world in a certain way. There is this writing life balance question that comes up. Is the writing a kind of life, or do you write around life? I don't know. How do you think about that writing life balance thing? It's maybe not an easy question to answer, but just something to poke at.
Yeah, I've found myself saying like, oh, like going back to real life or like the real world as if it's separate, but I suppose it's not. I mean, I like what he's saying about like working sort of according to a program and not according to mood, and kind of like just like keep working at it bit by bit and then do whatever else. But I think definitely it all bleeds in together, and it's fun because you start observing things and places and scenes and people in a different way maybe than you would have, I don't know, if you're not writing. But I think it helps you to tune in a way that can be fun. Sometimes I like forget to tune in, but then if I'm like doing something or going somewhere, or I'll like hear someone say something, or there will be a combination of words, or I'll see like I don't know, I keep finding like little notes, like grocery lists and stuff on the ground, on the pavement, and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Like pick it up and read it. Yeah, it's always fun to be grasped by something and then like take note of it. And then sometimes it won't work its way into something that you're writing, or be like an inspiration to something you're writing. So I think even if you're not really trying to go out into the world and like take notes and be exploring and whatever, like it just can kind of happen anyways, which is always like a pleasant surprise, I guess.
I think that's something that unites all of us writers, that experience. It reminds me of an interview I was recently listening to with Catherine Lacey. She was talking about the process of writing her most recent novel, Biography of X. And she said that that book in particular, but in general, when she's deeply immersed in a project, that it feels as though the world is kind of in a conspiracy to telegram information to her. And I certainly like what you're describing, Phoebe. I think that writing just can make life a lot more, I mean, at the very least bearable, but at the most like invigorating and exciting. I do kind of feel that sense of walking around and being more curious and being more receptive to things going on around me, people I meet. Maybe sometimes it's a coping mechanism. If I have to spend time with people I find dull or something, I go, oh, well, I can
like
study
material.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like everything is material. Doing chores. Just an aside, I love finding notes on the ground. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I found one yesterday outside Giant Tiger, but I left it there because it was like a reminder. It was like, call blah blah blah, whatever, 1 p.m. And I don't know, I was like, picked it up and then I put it back down. I was like, what if that person needs the reminder again? I don't know. Anyway, I left it where it was, but yeah.
I love it. You don't want to hex them by,
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with what you're saying. And I think in like the best of times too, I feel like everything that you do, like even you were talking about doing housework and stuff, everything becomes a bit like a little bit cinematic, or like more like playful. It's just like a sense of like pretending. And yeah, I keep thinking of like cinematic and pretending you're in a movie or something, but I think that can translate into writing as well. And just like pretending you're some sort of a character, or you're observing others as characters or places as sets, and it's fun when that is happening. It's a lot of fun.
I'm sure a lot of people have said this, but I remember my father saying this to me, that when you're an artist, when you're trying to make good work that's true to you, it often feels as though, or can be beneficial to get in touch with who you were when you were a child. I feel this. I mean, like a lot of people, my life trajectory was being kind of maybe a bit of an odd kid, and then going through a long period of adolescence of wanting to fit in, and then now kind of reconnecting with things that I liked when I was a child. You talked a bit about books that inspired you when you were an adolescent, but were there any books, or, I don't know, fairy tales or anything like that that you really liked as a child?
I read a lot of books about fairies, actually. I was really into fairies as a kid, and now I also think they're really cool and pretty, and like I love the little there's that famous painter who does the paintings of fairies. I feel like you would know who it is, Miriam. They're like in kids' books. Anyway, I can't remember, but do you know?
I feel like it's pre-Raphaelite, but good question.
No,
I'm gonna
it's
find
like
it for you. Keep going.
it's like newer. It's like she does like calendars and stuff.
Not
Calendars.
Anne Geddes.
No, 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 no.
Like
Oh,
the
I found it.
photographer.
No, 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 no. It's Cicely Mary Barker. Does that
Yes,
ring a bell?
that
It's very like
definitely.
childlike, but anyway, I had like used to have her calendars and her books. They're like these little paintings. Yeah, now I'm looking at them. They're so pretty. But
Definitely.
loved
They're iconic.
yeah, they are iconic. Loved reading about the fairies, and then I don't know. I remember like my brother being really into fantasy novels and trying to get me to like read The Golden Compass and stuff. And I never did for some reason. I never really got into that stuff. I actually never read The Golden Compass. He still wants me to read it, and I will someday. I don't know. I loved Junie B. Jones. Are you familiar with her? Yeah, Junie B.
I've never
Jones
heard of
was
her.
okay. She's like this little like crazy kid. She just would like get into a lot of mischief, and she was just like kind of wild, just like wild child. And there were like many books about Junie B. Jones, like little chapter books. I loved those. When I was in middle school, I liked Pretty Little Liars a lot. I love Charlotte's Web. I was actually just thinking about that book recently, and I liked the little drawings in it.
I also loved fairies as a
Yeah.
child. I think I watched that movie. I think we've talked about it. The Case of the Cottingley Fairies, the like really old photograph hoaxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember watching that as a kid and being really sad that it wasn't real, like realizing that it was all a hoax after, and being really quite upset.
That's funny. I think I was like, I had a different reaction. I was like, so you're saying there's a chance that there are fairies, but yeah, yours
I
is a
think
more tempered and
no,
realistic.
I think that there are fairies, truly. But yeah, no, it's funny that you said just about like things kind of coming back, interests working their way back into your life as an adult, and still think fairies are great. Haven't built like a fairy house since I was a little kid, but would love to do that. Yeah, and writing as well, and like drawing floor plans, like into like setting things up, and like interior decorating, like all of these things that I used to be into as a kid have like come back, which is interesting and fun.
I mean, you were both talking about paintings and visual art. I guess I wanted to touch on, Phoebe, the fact that you do make visual art in addition to writing fiction, which Miriam was discussing earlier. I was curious, do you usually work on both at the same time? Do you like jumping back and forth? Does one inform the other? Do the processes feel different?
Yeah, I think with the visual art stuff, it sort of comes and goes. Like I think for whatever reason, like I take that less seriously in my mind than I do writing. Like I think I'm not really, well, I'm not trained in either, but I don't have as much experience painting. I've definitely spent less hours painting than I have writing. I'll spend a lot of time on it if I'm working on a project. So I know like the paintings that I did, I think that was like last summer. I haven't really done like that was like all those interior ones, with like the beds and stuff. But I haven't really done much painting since then, which is sad to say. They also do relate in some ways. Like as I was saying before, like I really, as I'm writing, it feels like a very visual process, and I'm often like seeing the rooms as I'm describing them, or even if I don't describe them in my writing, I see them very clearly. And often I feel an impulse to like paint it or have it, shown as a film or something. Like I kind of want that to go along with the writing. And there was a time when I started writing the collection of short stories, which I've now finished, but I wanted it to be the stories accompanied by paintings or drawings that I had done of the spaces that the characters were in. So like mostly interiors. That has not happened, but I also wanted there to be like a photographic element. I'm not trying to publish the book with that in it because I don't even know how one would go about incorporating it all and making it still like, I don't know, marketable, I guess. Having visual art with writing, with fiction writing is cool, and I don't see it a lot, but I'm definitely interested in having both at once. Yeah, the process of painting definitely feels different than writing because I think because I know less about it and I'm more removed from that world, it feels like a little bit more light and playful, and it feels maybe not as scary in a way.
Are you conscious of your theoretical reader while you write? If so, do you find it helpful or distracting, or is that something you try not to think about as much?
I really try not to think about it, but of course, sometimes it works its way in, especially with editing, and especially when I've started to like send things out. So I'm like trying to get this collection of stories published, and every time I send it somewhere, I'm like, oh, that you're thinking of that people are going to be reading it. So I very much, I try to keep the reader out of my mind and just like write for myself / for the enjoyment of the process and also the cathartic nature of it, and just sort of following a vision and following a thread and seeing what happens. When I'm getting into the editing and I'm thinking about maybe trying to send a story and try to get it published, it's hard not to think about the reader. And I don't know. So it's scary, but then at the same time, like, of course, it's exciting to share your work with people. This is sort of what I was thinking about when we were talking about plotting a story. It's almost like with the novella that I'm working on, I'm thinking more about the reader. And I guess I'm worried that maybe the more you write or the more you become in a world of other writers or other readers, do you start thinking more and more about your reader as you continue to write, as you continue to publish? Like, I don't know, have you guys had that experience with writing where it's changed as you continue to write?
I've had a couple pieces published now. The more it happens, the more I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm out there. If someone Googles my name, they can draw whatever conclusions they want about me. And so I think about my audience less and less probably with each. And I mean, that's a huge relief.
That's
like,
awesome.
that's
Yeah.
where I want to be. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I guess I've said this a few times, but when I'm writing, I certainly can't think too hard about readers. I mean, sometimes it'll kind of creep into my mind, but I find I have to just focus on the work and what I want to do with it. And of
Mhm.
course, I'm really grateful for anyone who does read and talk about my work in any way, whether they love it or hate it or somewhere in between. That's all good. But yeah, when I'm writing, I definitely find I can't go there. You end up creating this hypothetical reader who doesn't exist, and you ascribe like certain expectations to them, and then you start playing this game with yourself, like what will this nebulous imaginary person think of it? And that's just a losing battle at the gate. So that's my personal experience. If that answers the question, I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what you said, Miriam, about like people getting to know the real you. Like, I think I have more fear, trepidation around the people that I actually do know that already like me and are my friends or family reading my work versus like the hypothetical stranger, like whatever, anyone else. Like, I have more, I feel more of a sense of like feeling a bit more self-conscious with the people that I know reading my work than strangers.
Yeah, you're one person to the people you know, but then, what if they read it and they think that you're like, I don't know, equivalent with a serial killer or something. I can guarantee, Phoebe,
Right.
as a huge fan of your writing, Mike and I both think that you're really talented, and we're not like, who does she think she is? But yeah, I mean, the fear is there. I don't know.
No, I wasn't thinking of you guys. I was thinking more just like family. Yeah, like you said, I think people often experience someone in one specific way, and we all know that we hold multitudes, and there's many parts of me and of everyone. I try to just like write for myself and whatever, and I do, but I also love sharing work with people, and I like, I want people to read my writing, and if I didn't, then I would never be sending it anywhere, and it would just remain with me till my death. Anyway, yeah, y'all know what I'm saying.
I like to think we're like geodes, those rocks that look like plain rocks on the outside, but you crack them open and there's a lot of crystal in there.
Yeah, totally. Love that.
For me, the people I'm afraid of reading me are always like the people that I see who are like acquaintances I see at the farmer's market or something. But those are the ones that I'm scared of.
Yeah, you fear that they're like judging you from afar, or that they've created these ideas about you based off of a story that they read or whatever. Yeah.
Well, the reality is they're probably not reading anyways. So reading my stuff, not saying they're not reading at all.
You've been doing this podcast for a little while now. Like, I know you both read a lot about craft and you think about it and talk about it. You talk about it with each other, but is there anything like that you have like learned or has been like sort of enlightening or interesting, or threads of things that you've taken away from interviews? I'm just like curious if there's anything that you were like, okay, I'm going to take that into my writing practice.
Oh, definitely. I'd say that each of our we've had 3 episodes thus far, and we just recorded one before yours. So that's 4. I'd say definitely have taken at least one thing away from everything. I can thank Megan Kemp-G for demystifying poetry to me a little bit. The idea of the persona poem has made me much more curious and comfortable with the idea of writing poetry. And I am working on a poem right now. Don't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm working on it. Randy Nichols Schroeder, he had some really exciting things to say about what he calls like micro tensions and gaps. So you mentioned having read the Beats as an adolescent and feeling that you don't have to always follow the quote unquote writing rules. But at the same time, it can sometimes, there's like a fine balance between not following the rules and having enough of a template or formula to kind of have like a seatbelt on while you're doing it. I did find Randy's idea of like gaps. I think he was talking about a story by McKee. And when we talked to William Ping, he said that he had a sticky note on his wall while he was writing his first novel that said, you have everything you need, meaning you don't need to do more research. You don't need to, which I am like, I love not procrastinating, productive procrastinating on my writing. So that was like tempering and a reality check in some way for me. And then we just spoke to Lindsay Lerman, and she was talking a lot about, I think you'll really like that episode, Phoebe, when it comes out. She's talking about like kind of giving yourself permission to do things and kind of that psychological angle of writing and kind of getting over your own hang-ups or just like letting your imagination run free and seeing where it takes you.
I know you both read about craft and like have explored it a lot. So I just thought maybe there were new tidbits of nuggets of wisdom that you picked up.
Yeah, I think Miriam hit all the big ones. I think a thread that I've noticed with everybody is just learning how to get out of your own way. Like Randy talked about, sometimes language can get in the way, getting lost in the language. That's something I've found has come up a lot. That's like a good reminder.
Yeah, cool. We're definitely often the only ones in our own way. Just gotta follow the vision.
Have you read anything recently that's particularly excited you, other than what you've mentioned already?
Yeah, I just read the book Portrait of Jennie by Robert Nathan. It was a book that I picked up here in town on that little secondhand bookstore on the north side. Bookends, yeah. It's just this little novella, I guess, about a painter and who continues to paint this person named Jennie. And it's kind of like a fantasy and kind of like a romance, and it's really like dreamy and mysterious. The protagonist is a painter. It sort of is like about the creative process and getting in your own way, and as well as this relationship he has with his subject, Jennie. And yeah, it was great.
I'm looking it up right now. It looks really cool.
I think you'd really like it. You can borrow it if you want.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
So much for having me. That was fun. And
where can our listeners find you?
I have a website. It's phoebemarmura.com, and my Instagram is linked on that, but I'm not super active on Instagram. But yeah, just check out my website, and there's some links to stories, and there's also some paintings on there.